Rachel Patterson and Mr. Pete Roque. So today is Friday, February 11th, 2022. Can't believe we're already here, Pete. We've had quite a few episodes thus far this year that have been just fantastic. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. We have another guest today. It's going to be just as equally as fantastic.
Yeah. So, as always, we hope you had a wonderful week and thank you for joining us on this Friday. Everybody in the chat, and then, of course, our lovely guest, Mr. Steve Carmen. Mr. Carmen brings to us over 30 years of investigative experience, enforcement in the private investigation services. So it sounds like, Mr. Carmen, you own a company called Special Investigations Unit, SIU. So we're excited to have you on this morning. We're excited to hear about your company. We're excited to hear how that relates to the investigative process, possibly through, code enforcement, law enforcement, and so on and so forth. So good morning, sir. Thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you.
And, we always look at, for guests, we always look at what people bring to the table. And Steve has 30 years of police, and he's an investigator. He is the owner of the SIU resource group, like Rachel said. And he has handled all types of cases from mayhem to murder. And he's handled numerous organized crime and mafia cases involving, drugs, money, and a lot of undercover work. He's also private investigator to ever be publicly recognized by a mafia boss for his investigations and excellence. And Steve also enjoys business investigations of all different sorts of types. So with that, Steve, can you give us a little background on how you got into police work and investigative?
Yeah, sure can, Pete. It was sort of a funny route. I came out of college, looked for a job, right? Like most graduates. I was offered a job in insurance, which I thought, well, that doesn't really match up to what I know, but you need a check, you take a job. So I started in that. And, of course, insurance has a lot of fraud, just ripe with fraud, right? I always found that interesting to study the people. Maybe I could find a fact or pattern to use on the next case. Just sort of an interesting thing. So I was on there for a while, and there was an opening at the sheriff's department. I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't know if I'd be that good, but maybe I could give it a try. But I like the insurance job, and of course, I like the check there too. I'll be very honest. So these folks said, hey, you know what? Why don't you go over and do that? And I said, well, how could I work here? They said, well, we could make some arrangements if you'll do insurance fraud for us. I thought, well, I was a young guy, 2 jobs, I don't care, right? So I took that opportunity, went to the sheriff's department and worked 2 jobs. Pete, it was one of the greatest decisions I had ever made. I learned so much about people. So much I thought about people was wrong, right? You take them at face value. It just was a real eye-opening experience. It really, everything sort of launched from there. Sure did.
So, going from, and no kind of short sell getting into PD, because getting into the police department is hard work. It's not, just don't walk off the streets, and say, hey, I want to be a police officer, and you're a police officer. But there's one of the things that you said you were wrong about people. What is the one thing that you realize you were wrong about people? Because as code enforcement officers, we tend to knock on a door and we see a face and we're like, oh, this guy's not going to comply. And then the guy complies.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's very funny you would say that, Pete. A lot of times people take or make decisions based on past experiences. I've shared with you, I think in private, maybe my beginning wasn't that great, right, where I grew up at. So a lot of those folks had certain ideas, used certain words, had certain attitudes. So, I sort of assume that always carries over. And of course, I was wrong, Pete. I learned a lot. So I do take people at face value, but if someone's, compliant, they are compliant. But if they lie, of course, I take them at that value too.
now, when you do conduct these investigations and you meet people and like they lie to you, do you see that as a defense mechanism, or do you see it as a way for them to just overtly just kind of cover their tracks?
Yeah, it's really funny about a lie, Pete. I've taught this in some classes. People lie for different reasons. One, they don't want to be caught doing something wrong, which happens, all the time. Sometimes they lie about something that's close to your subject matter, but they don't want to be found out. Maybe it's a husband saying he was at a certain location. You think it's because of the case. Maybe he was seeing a girlfriend on the side. It has nothing to do with the case, but certainly is a lie that's close to the case. Sometimes people lie just lie, sort of in their mindset. So you sort of have to realize, why they're lying. And there's different questions, you can ask. Certainly chatting for a while, certainly doing your homework up front, knowing your subject is crucial.
Yeah, see how that relates with code enforcement. Like Pete and I were talking about before you got on, that, everything that we do is investigative, whether we're trying to understand why this person is in the in violation that they are. Ultimately, we're doing the same thing, trying to find out a reason so that we can create a solution, right?
Absolutely. Great point.
And one of the things now, when you in PD in the sheriff's department, what are were you always doing investigations, or were you patrol, or how did you get more into the whole investigative? Because you obviously handled some pretty major cases. I mean, for being recognized by mafia boss saying, "Hey, this guy does good work." There's some merit to it. With a so what was your pathway in the sheriff's department?
When I first started, Pete, I was so eager to learn from anybody that would teach me that, I had no problem being humble. If you knew more than me, I want to hang out with you and learn, right? So I started on the street and I volunteered for different neighborhoods, different areas that, I didn't grow up in, right? You'd also volunteered at the jail. You learn a lot at the jail. Believe me, some things you don't want to learn. And I also volunteered at the mental health hospital, the criminal unit also. There was a way I went to the courts. I went to see people in different stress factors, maybe to see how they would react, how they would lie. Everything I wanted to learn, Pete. There really wasn't anything that I wouldn't go and study.
That's awesome. And here's another point when it comes to when, because as far as code enforcement goes, we interact with the public all day long, and we have to interact, and there's a level of emotional intelligence that we have to employ out there. Because I'm a big proponent, like, hey, somebody may just having a bad day, and like you said, the different stress factors are out there. Also understanding you worked in different parts of town, understanding that there's a cultural difference. I'm not saying like nationality wise, but like the way people live. Like, for example, in a gang neighborhood, people act differently than they do in an affluent neighborhood, or a mobile home park, or or they act differently. So your approach sometimes needs to change, and we have to understand and be cognizant that we can't treat, we always say we have to treat everybody the same, but we do in a manner where it's where that emotional intelligence has to kick off, because with some folks you just can't start accusing them of something just because they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I've taught that in classes to new officers also. There's two mindsets, I think, with law enforcement, maybe code enforcement. One is what you call a wrestler mentality. The guy's going to yell, I'll yell back. Maybe we'll, get sort of nasty. The other it really is what I call a chess player mentality, Pete. By trade, I am a chess player. I don't like to yell. I don't like to, be all nasty with people. I really don't like it when they're like that with me either. That surprises people when I say that, but it's true. So what I do is I try and size up who I'm talking to, on a potentially negative situation. One thing I see a whole lot, if you will let me out, is if I was talking to a subject that I thought could be negative, hey, look, it's obvious, you're a very nice guy, right? It's obvious, I see you, you're a very classy guy. I don't want to bother you, but I need to look at this. Pete, no one ever says I'm not a nice guy. They never argue with I'm not a classy guy. they always say, "Well, sure I am, sure I am." So they're right there. They're already starting to agree with you.
Yeah. And it goes to like, Rachel's she's big on customer service, and because we do have to understand that when we talk to these individuals, we don't want to set somebody off. I mean, because people have different trigger points, and especially in code enforcement when you're visiting somebody or you're trying to gather more intel or information, and it's always important to have that. One of the things that it's funny because I have a 5-year-old. He calls everybody boss or chief. Hey, chief, and I know he learned that from me because right, giving off when I speak to people, I give them that level of respect. People say you have to earn respect, which is true, but at the same time, when you come out and give people that respect right off the bat, that you're there on their property working with them, for me it's such a show of respect to them, and that we're visiting them. And I think when conducting even investigations or interviews with people, you have to show them that so they can they'll respect you enough to trust you to give you information.
Yeah, that's really a great point, Pete. If you're respectful, that's normally what I get, in return. Yeah, there are some exceptions, right? Some people, just want to fight, just to fight, but that's really pretty unusual. And I got to tell you, with the same mindset too, Pete, I use in all those investigations. I think I maybe touched on it earlier, but I have had some very big cases. I have studied from criminals that have done things in the past. I get them to talk to me after the crime's committed when they're in jail, so I can study from that. Why, Pete? Because I try and be a genuinely nice guy, right? And they talk to me, Pete, and I keep learning more and more and more. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's really a valuable tool. It sure is.
You say two really important points to me. Like Pete said, I'm all about customer service and connecting with individuals. Um, I like how you said you go into it, you're saying, like you're a good sir, or well, I say good sir, but you're a good guy, a classy guy, because how do people argue with that? I find myself when I walk up to a female's residence, sometimes this gets me in trouble and sometimes it doesn't. But the very first thing out of my mouth is, good morning, beautiful, or, lovely. Because people don't typically say, well, I'm not beautiful, I'm not lovely, like you said with, classy as far as good. So, I really do think that that's important in what you said with no matter what we're doing. The other point that you brought up that I think is extremely important is you use the word genuine. You truly have to be a genuinely good person to want to do these type of careers, investigative, code, law enforcement, whatever have you, because ultimately you're going to get those results. As you stated, you're going to see, the whole thing come to a resolution when you are that good guy and treating someone with respect. So those were some really great points you brought up there, sir.
Thanks. It really is about the resolution too. It isn't about the wrestling match or there's other ways to call that too. I won't use that here, but it's all about getting to where you want the case to be. That's
Right.
really what it's about, and not an ego. You're right.
One of the things that comes out in code enforcement a lot is the approach, you having the authority. And this is what I always preach. We have the authority, and a lot of times you know there's a violation, it needs to be resolved, end of case. But it's the approach on how you're coming up to somebody. Hey, I'm the city, this is what you got to do because I said so, versus you and talking to them like saying, hey, classy guy, this is what we're doing, maybe you didn't know, and have that dialogue and start that dialogue. Like, for example, a lot of times we have to talk to people because we suspect that somebody may be living in the a career structure, or we might they might have some sort of like business activity in the back that's prohibited, and we need to get to that backyard somehow. So what are some techniques you would say, when to, I wouldn't say persuade, but kind of help with us to have that dialogue with those residents?
Yeah, what I like to do is maybe it sounds too sweet, but I always see something, find something to compliment. So, Pete, if I drove up to your house, I'm sure I wouldn't find a code violation. But if I did, I want to move toward the backyard. Obviously, I'm going to treat you nice, treat you very sincere, and say, "Hey, Pete, look at that. Maybe that '76 Camaro in your driveway. Man, I love that. That's interesting. Hey, can you show that to me?" So you'll take a second. You're proud, right? So now we've moved from the front to the side, moving toward the back, right? So I always have a goal there. Hey, your shrubs on the side of the your wife put in are really, really nice, right? So obviously you're gonna show that to me, right? And I don't make stuff up. I don't compliment things that are ugly, right? But I find points of commonality, points of respect, points that we can be positive on. And again, if I'm positive, I'm moving in the right direction. I hey, that's almost always what I get.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's funny because Rachel and I had that conversation how we do that NLP kind of talking to folks and saying, hey, this is what we have in common. And this is why you should it's a great techniques. One of the things that we also wanted to touch base on today was in our code enforcement departments, and then one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is to talk to some of the investigative you know duties that we may have. Sometimes, we as code enforcement, we may have to do stakeouts, and code enforcement generally isn't used to doing things like that. So I remember we had a like I mean you spoke about it. We had a cockfighting operation that we were like, hey, when are they doing it? To what extent? How many people? These are things, especially with cockfighting rings, they could be cartel or mafia related, and we have to gather intel. So how do a lot of times the police department is like, well, that's more of a zoning issue, unless we know it's a cartel issue, then it's really not. So anyways, what are some investigative techniques that you think code enforcement officers should employ when first getting into the whole investigative realm?
Yeah, hey, Pete, I think we have an audio issue. I can sort of hear it, but not that good. Heard the point about the cartels.
Yep. Sorry about that. It was a comment that one of our guys put out there, and that was from Joseph Liff. So we do have some folks, and he likes. I like the approach of each case with a curiosity about the conditions or the way they are, and trying to get the citizens to share that story with me. It helps better determine the best response.
Yeah, it's really all about the approach, Pete. Again, I'm always sincere. I don't make stuff up. I'm not going to start lying to somebody. I'm there to do a job, to do a business. But I can tell you, I get these guys to talk to me. Some have, committed heavy, heavy crimes, Pete, and they'll sit in a room and talk to me for hours without an attorney because, I'm straightforward, right? And sometimes I just say, and this is an approach that some people shy from. Sometimes I just say, hey, look, this is why we're looking at this. This is a bind. This is a problem, here's some ways to you could get out of this much quicker to help yourself. Pete, I'm not their attorney, I'm really not their brother, right? But I tell them, hey, look, if you did this and this, this problem is resolved in like a day. You did this and this, solved in like 2 days. Sometimes it's a matter of just pointing out like obvious options.
Yeah, so giving somebody like a solution, like saying, "Hey, this is the way this is going to go down," and just being straight up forward is what you're basically telling me. So let's say, for example, a code enforcement case, we're like, "Hey, you're not doing this. We're this is the repercussions of you not doing it. I don't want to go that route, but this is what's going on." Is that basically an approach that you take?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Pete. I think we're losing some audio again. I apologize. Trying to make sure it's not on my end, maybe.
No, it's good. We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. And I know you're traveling right now, so I know you're always out and about doing, different jobs and stuff. So we really appreciate your time, and sometimes the audio does cut in and out, and yeah, I apologize for that.
No, no problem, Pete. You do a great job. I can tell you the code enforcement officers I've ever worked on have always done really a great job. They've turned some very, very big cases from drug houses to child abuse cases by keeping their eyes open, talking to law enforcement and investigators. And I got to tell you, I mean, they're really valued so much. Sometimes not thought of as the first law enforcement partner, but I got to tell you that they are. They are the ultimate front line and very much appreciated. They are.
So, Mr. Carmen, you say you have worked with code enforcement officers. Can you share some of the type of cases? You mentioned a few of them in the beginning of your statement, but can you share with us, some of those interesting cases that you have dealt with possibly working with a code enforcement officer?
Yeah, sure can. I've had probably the most interesting was a case in Alaska, right? And a kid had overdosed, and it was really sad. He did not die; he recovered. So I can go ahead and tell you the end of the story. But we were obviously trying to track down where he got the tainted drugs from. So he sort of knew, but he couldn't remember. He was high. It was, a neighborhood where a lot of the homes, looked the same, right? So I was thinking of a way to try and track that down. No one was cooperating. And so eventually, what happens up there in a lot of those grow houses, and I'm sure you've seen it too, especially in Alaska, there's what they call ice damming on the outside from the water. And so eventually, I talked to a code enforcement officer. We put our heads together. He actually came up with that idea. That was not my idea. So I credit code enforcement 100%. He said, "Hey, let me look for those. I'll find you a lead, and I think we can get this." He did. In about 2 weeks, he found some ice forming on the outside. People were pumping in some extra water because of the heat, and that's what broke that case. I mean, it really was huge. That was solved by code enforcement. It really was not solved by me.
That's
That's
pretty cool, sir.
that's awesome. Code enforcement, like you said, a lot of times they're not regarded as being, law enforcement, but we do assist. Me personally, I've worked on some cases with Homeland Security, with the FBI, with our local law enforcement, and I can tell you that we made a big difference in their cases. And it's and because we're out there, we know our neighborhoods, we see what we see, so this is one of the important things that we really get to help law enforcement solve their cases. I mean, there's times where we're doing some, like you said, with the child welfare cases. We knock on the door, like 3-year-old answers the door, mom's high on the couch. We have to turn it over to Child Protective Services because there's possible danger of a kid being hurt, or parents overdosing or something like that. So we do see these things, and in the case with Alaska, and it's funny because I've actually met Alaskan code enforcement officers, which is same thing with Hawaii. It's like you don't really think about code enforcement in Alaska, but there is code enforcement in Alaska. So yeah. Yeah.
Different set of eyes. That's what I was going to say. It's a different set of eyes. I was talking to you last week, Pete, and you were on a boat and they were doing inspections for code enforcement, for something out in the bay. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Code enforcement officers do have a very extensive set of skills where they're an extra set of eyes for pretty much everything out there. So that's cool that they were able to help in this situation.
Yeah, I've found code enforcement to always be partners, and I like what I call the inclusion method. I mean, we're all working toward a goal to have a better society, certainly a better city. And, I was asking for help, and they've asked me for help, and it's just been a great partnership. It really has.
And I think, going out to different code enforcement divisions out there listening to this show, it's important to have some investigative skills. There's people out there that teach these investigative skills, like Mr. Carmen here. So one of the tools that we have, some code enforcement divisions do stakeouts or do investigative like work, like real good, like lengthy work. So let's say somebody wanted to start an like a investigative uh, project. What would be
Yeah, I'm
some of the
sorry,
first
Pete. I
things?
think we're losing the audio again. I'm trying to adjust it on this end, but Not sure what's happening. I apologize. Trying.
No worries at all, sir.
So, just to repeat the question is, so what are some methods that you would tell a code enforcement team to when they're starting an investigation? What are some considerations they should have?
Yeah, I did catch the last part of that. Consideration to have on starting an investigation. Look, I want to know, who's in the house, what's going on. The usual technique is to run a police check maybe on who you're going to deal with. So if you're going to deal with a guy named Charlie Smith, right? Does he have a record? That makes perfect sense, Pete. I would agree with that. But we know that a lot more than one person, right? It could be a son that's dangerous or has issues, maybe a wife that has some sort of anti-government feeling, right? One thing that's often left out too is not just the criminal record. I was at the police department. I checked myself to see what the police run history is to the house, because sometimes the run history does not reflect the arrest history or the report history, right? There can be arguments, there could be a lot of fighting, sort of indicative of personality traits. So if the police show up a lot to sort of diffuse but not arrest, means that these people are like maybe higher strung, I guess, lack of a better term. So I check that too. Certainly check for, I go right on the internet, right? And see, if it's Charlie Smith of Elm Street, does he come up for anything, right? Is he, sometimes you'll find him in some sort of odd group, odd behavior, a hate group. I usually find those fairly quickly, Pete. And, it's always sort of scary, what's out there on folks too. So, I want to know everything. I think it's always important.
And one of the things about Steve here is he in his multiple what do you call it credentials, he does skip tracing. So I mean, this guy can probably find anything about everybody. So so no, so it's good techniques to say. So let's say for a code enforcement officer, since we're not law enforcement, let's say we do encounter somebody that may have a history, and what would you say? How do we coordinate with our local law enforcement? Say, hey, this is what I found out. How does one approach our law enforcement to do this?
I'm sorry, Pete. I didn't hear that. I'm still having some audio issues. I apologize.
No. So the question was, let's say as code enforcement officers, we do encounter some history of some potential criminal activity. How does a code enforcement officer approach their local law enforcement and say, hey, this is what I'm concerned about?
Yeah, I tell you, if I see like type of history, some of the things that I would do. Look, if I see a problem coming up, or I think it could be an issue or a false complaint against me, people do that too. I go on record with somebody, right? Doesn't have to be the mayor or the police chief, but go on record, say, hey, look, I see this, this, and this. I'll be at this address here, right then. So 6 months down the road, if you're accused of, I don't know, some bad act, or saying a false word, you're on the record with some concern up front. The officers, if there's a problem, I've always had them go to the door with me. But certainly, if it's busier, I get that. But I've never had an instance where I couldn't get an officer to at least pull his car up in the street in front of the house. And, when people see witnesses, Pete, they sort of act differently, right? Because someone else is there, right? And it's always found that really crucial also. I take photos when I'm there. I do it nicely, but I always go ahead and document what I have. And another thing is too, I make notes as soon as I leave there, right? I don't wait. Yeah, I've been to court on some of these before where there's like a litigation, a complaint, and then the question comes up, hey, when was this report written? That afternoon at the end of the day at like 4:30 before I left, right? So you saw the house then at 10:30 that morning, so you waste 6 hours. You couldn't have forgotten anything, like a detail in 6 hours. Pete, that's actually a very fair question. So when I get to the car, I make those field notes immediately. Sure do.
That's awesome. That's a good strategy. So and some of us in code enforcement, we jump from inspection to inspection and wait till the end of the day. So just jotting down a few cliff notes, it's always recommended. One of the things that I train my staff, because in code enforcement, a lot of us just deal with property maintenance issues. So I say, hey, you know what? You don't have to write me a Stephen King novel. Just jot down a few sentences and what it is that you're writing, that key points of what you observed. And that's always, for me, that's always valuable because we could always go back and fix, make grammatical corrections, add to the report based on what we're seeing in our photographs, things like that. But yes, I would say I would agree with you. Writing some cliff notes or writing something right off the bat that's relevant, it's very important. Well, thank you for that tip.
Yeah.
So another question would be, when we're doing like a stakeout, like what is something that you would recommend when we're beginning like a type of stakeout investigation? For code enforcement, we might have a use issue, like a land use issue, where we say, hey, uh, for example, let's say a bar that's now morphing into a nightclub or even a strip club, and we have to gather that type of intel because it's really more of a zoning issue. How would you suggest that somebody start some sort of investigative, stakeout?
Yeah, I always do those low profile and low key. Look, I've got a trunk full of clothes. I can be anything at any time, right? You've seen me. I'm just sort of an average, goofy looking guy, right? But I can be a road worker. I can be a cable guy. I could be anything I want to be. Now, maybe your jurisdiction would or would not allow that. I'm not sure. That's be up to the supervisors there. But I can say this, so Pete, I'm definitely flexible. And you know what? I keep a very low profile. People generally see me, but they don't remember what I said. I'm not going to use any words that would be like unusual. I don't make a scene. Try and be wallpaper, Pete. That's the greatest thing on a surveillance. You can be 2 hours later, like me, right? They go, "Hey, was there somebody there?" Most people would say, uh, I think there was. It maybe like a red-haired guy. But I'm not sure what he looked like, right? Didn't say anything. He was sort of there, right? That's what I want, Pete. Wallpaper.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a very good tip because I've done my share of undercover, not undercover, but I go in there as a plainclothes person and just see what it's about. And I've done that before. In the city of Garden Grove, we had what they called a Vietnamese cafes where we were seeing if they were selling alcohol where they weren't supposed to. And we sat in there and we did our thing. And yeah, but I was always pegged right off the bat. I don't know why, but and maybe because I'm not Vietnamese, but but anyways, you have a point. Yeah, just be quiet, be very nonchalant. That's a very good tip. A lot of us code enforcement folks were really loud and alpha people, and it's very hard for us. But I would see how that would make sense.
Yeah,
So
it really does. It does work well, Pete. I got to tell you, I use that in just about everything. Especially if it's really like a high risk situation, me speaking a lower volume, right? So I'm never going to be that guy that is seen as aggressive because, when you're looking for surveillance, you're looking for an investigator, the first thing you look for is what you think is a policeman, maybe a guy with like a buzz cut and a big neck, all muscled up, right? I'm not that guy, right? So I'm going to be the guy that, well, guess he was there, and people sort of think back and they just can't remember. So really, Pete, the less they can remember, the better. Works out well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I do know some code enforcement officers that want to say, as soon as they finish their investigation, like, "Ha, I got you," instead of going writing a report and doing something formally down the road. Yeah. Now, so now, can you tell us a little bit about your consulting group? You know, what kind of things? How did you get into that? What made you make that leap? Because some of us go from government sector to private sector. So how was that leap for you?
Yeah, well, it was, Pete, and I appreciate you asking that. That was a big jump for me. I wasn't sure I could do it. I thought I could, but I've always used this tool chest, right? And I would definitely encourage others to do the same. I've always studied criminal acts, interviewed them after the fact. So I've learned more and more and more. And what I found though was that, if you're good and you're really sincere, you will have customers and clients. People want to know, people want to learn things. And with the mafia and the organized crime cases, Pete, that was never my goal. I mean, you can tell by looking at me, I'm not that tough, right? But so I get a lot of questions with that. How did you deal with them? What was the interaction? So I just tell you, normally in that lifestyle, and this is no secret, it's all out there. You have people that are muscle, some people that are earners, right? My interaction with them has been as an earner under when it was like an undercover operation. So I was the guy that would earn money. Generally, what I do is I earn money, but I have a problem that needs fixed. Conveniently, that problem, Pete, is something that they can fix. So they see themselves as coming in on my deal. That's how I've interacted with them. And I really didn't have much of a problem with that. I've done it 6 times. Once was a collateral case where I was near someone, near someone that was near someone they were looking at. The other 5 were direct cases. So those were people they were directly gunning for. They wanted like a wire feed on. Those are much more dramatic, high-strung cases. But generally, I've never had a problem with that. Doing the right thing, I've always believed in that. It's harder with time though, Pete. My face is out there. I'm on the internet now. Yeah, giving some presentations. So my wife is encouraging me maybe to back off some of that. So I have to think about that.
They'll be like, "Hey, I saw you on the internet. Now you're selling me this stuff."
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny. And I also see you're the VP of the Homeland Security Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about the Homeland Security Foundation?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking. But that's a great organization, really. And it's a not for profit organization. It has a public face and a private face, right? Just by definition of what it is. So some of the public things we would do would be to give a like cybersecurity safety training free, domestic violence prevention training free. Those are all out there, Pete. And those are like really great things. We do those in all communities. There's no limitations. We purposely seek out different cities, different types of folks. That's all out there, right? For the good of the country. The private face would be more of a private request from a maybe like an entity or somebody need help with something. We're all about just furthering the country. All the country though, Pete. That's just one segment. We all live here, and we all need a better place to live in.
No, no, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And we love having people on this show that have something to offer. One of the things that kind of, when I talked to you, we talked about like how there's a nexus between, home, the way the home is versus the criminal value. There's a nexus there. And code enforcement sometimes is that first, I wouldn't say first responders, but first set of eyes, to bring something to attention.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I'm a big believer in the broken window theory, I guess, what they used to call it. Maybe it has a different name now, but if you have a house, Pete, I'll just take my house. If I allow a broken window to go, next time maybe I'm not mowing the lawn, and then I have bags of trash in the back, and I begin to accept things like as is, right? Accept a lower standard of living, maybe my friends become lower. I think it's important. We all have to have some accountability, especially to ourselves, especially to our neighbors and our fellow citizens. Very important.
It's interesting that you say that. So in code enforcement, we sometimes have that one problem house in a neighborhood, and the neighbors get sick of it, so they move out. And people that either can't afford or sometimes they don't care that that house is there, they'll buy it next door, and then it just kind of like you said, it dominoes. You got a lot of people leaving that neighborhood because they no longer enjoy it because of that one house, and it starts bringing a different element, and it starts running down. So yes, and when you have rundown properties where people don't care, you have individuals that don't care, and you know they start doing they start running a mechanic shop out of their garage, or start a bootleg a store out of their home, and you just get this element of the neighborhood goes to a different place than it would. And yesterday I went for a walk, and I in my old neighborhood that I used to work in, and we had a problem hoarder house, and everybody around them moved, and we had a bunch of people that moved in, and the neighborhood basically kind of went a little bit downhill. Well, we ended up cleaning that house, and I was walking by, and I don't know why I remember that house, but it is now the best looking house because we did some crazy enforcement. The person lost their home, and because of the cleanup, but now the neighborhood went back to what it was before, which is amazing. It code enforcement works. In that particular case, when it comes to investigations, and here's something that that I want to touch upon. When you're dealing with some folks, they tend to find you. So, what's something that you would recommend for somebody to protect their identity? You as an investigator, how does one protect themselves when dealing with some of these problem individuals? The reason I say that is that problem individual came to City Hall with a hammer one time, and he was looking for my boss, but we don't know why he had that hammer. I'm like, oh, he's not here, so he got mad and left. But I mean, even if my boss was there, I wouldn't say, hey, let me get him out. But what would you say somebody can do to protect themselves and their
Yeah,
identity?
that's actually a great question. I've been threatened probably hundreds of times actually. Probably about half of those I believe were real. The other half maybe were just emotional blow off. But yeah, that's a lot of threats, right? So some things I do is look, um, like my house here is in my wife's name. And I've had people go, well, if something happened, that could, yeah, I guess that it could be an issue, right? So I do that, right? I definitely limit where I tell people I live at. I don't sign up for contests. Not one of those guys. Um, but I'm also very protective too, like where I go. If someone's like around me, who's parked next to me, who's sitting in the car, is that the guy that's going to recognize me 5 years ago? It could be Pete, right? I mean, I make a lot of people mad, right? I know that. So I'm always looking at some of those things. The other thing too is, if someone says, "Hey, look, do you want," like the emails, what I call the phishing emails, right? I'm very unlikely to respond to any of that. The phone calls, if I'm being checked out, I'm going to check you out first before I give you anything. I've always just very cautious and careful. You get the information about me that I want to give out if I don't know you. That's the philosophy I have.
It's awesome. That's awesome. Now, like obviously, I'm on social media a lot. You see my posts. I'm very, would you recommend for folks not to post too much personal information out there on social media?
Yeah, I do have two social media sites. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. Both those are for business. If you and you go look at those. I have no secrets on there, Pete. I have no pictures of my family at all. I have a wife and three kids. You'll find that nowhere. you find no mention of them, no mention of my parents, no mention of my hometown even. You might be able to figure that out with time, but you have to work to really find me, Pete. And yeah, it's meant to be that way too. I don't join like a bowling club and put like my personal information out there. I'm not going to do that. So, everything on social media is business. I have a friend on the police department here. He has one Facebook site for business, right? You'll see that, but then he has just a fake name, Pete. You know, and he posts all his personal stuff on there. So if you don't know that fake name, if you're like not a friend of his, you will never find him. Has nothing to do with his name, and he actually lists a fake city on the other side of the country. So yeah, he has the same account. He just takes a few precautions.
Good
Awesome.
advice, good information, good advice. So, sir, do you see yourself more in you have this company, you provide these services. Are you in the everyday workings of, making these investigations happen? Or are you starting to see yourself more on the teaching side and getting the word of what you do and the importance of it out there?
Gosh, that's a really great question. I've been asked that. Actually, I see it as a combination of things now. It's certainly more over the years. I'd love to do investigations. I probably will always do that to some degree, but I love to teach too. Tell students about maybe where I made mistakes at. Right, try to help somebody get further ahead. And I really enjoyed the Homeland Security Foundation too. Teaching and providing services. I think that makes a very big difference in lives, and I think I will definitely always do that too.
Well, and the reason I say that, sir, is, I can only appreciate, you've said several times it's what you can give the world. So, just in talking with you just for these, 45 minutes this morning, I see so much of what you can give the world and just the way that you come about it, your calmness, your demeanor. I think you are able to, or at least myself, I'm really able to take that information in. And I think that you're a great speaker in the sense of, getting this information out. So I look forward to seeing more from the teaching side of you on this aspect. Just looking at your website and all of the accreditations that you just have so much to give the world. So thank you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate what both of you do too, and I've had so many great mentors and teachers over the years, and it's just important to leave a good legacy. And I think one of the most undervalued things in this country is, being a good citizen, right? Like a long time ago, you would get a citizenship grade or award, right? Somehow that left, and we're on something else now. And I would love for that to go back. I want to be a good neighbor. That's exactly what my goal is.
I love it.
And so we have jurisdictions out there that actually give a best improvement compliance awards, which is people don't hear about that, but they do get those awards. Hey, thank you for improving you're the most improved house in the neighborhood. They don't say that you're in violation and you complied with the code. They just said, hey, they acknowledge that you took the time and effort to make your neighborhood better. And a lot of communities do that as a program, and I think that's good. And I love that, that the intersections that code enforcement has with investigation, law enforcement, recruiting. I mean, we have so much interaction with everybody, and I love that you came on today. We connected on social media. And I follow your stuff, you follow my stuff, and we're in two different sectors, but somehow we can intertwine. When it comes to investigations, you do have the knowledge, you have the experience, which a lot of us code enforcement officers don't. Some of us do, property maintenance, and some of us get into that evolution of having to do these type of investigations, and having a professional like yourself be able to teach us, or at least give us a glimpse of your world to help us kind of improve our world is we thank you. We have a lot of gratitude.
Yeah, just bringing it all back around and all together. You said it best. I say it every single day with everything that I do is be a good neighbor. We're all in it for the same common goal. whatever we do, investigation, code work, hairstyles, whatever it is that we do in life, do it with respect, be genuine, and be a good neighbor. So I love that you said that, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much.
And with that, we appreciate you coming on today. There's a lot more information if you go to SIU resources. Am I saying is it inc.com, right? Correct. What is
Yeah.
the website? Let me see. I don't have it pulled up right. Okay, it's siuresourcegroup.com. That is the
Yes.
website. I'll go ahead and put that up there if anybody wants to look up Steve here. And Steve, is it okay to share your email if anybody wants to contact you?
No,
Or
sure is my email, my phone number. I'm definitely all through Pete, and if I can be of assistance to anyone, just call me. I'll certainly share any mistakes I made and any good solutions I have to. Always happy to help anybody. I sure
Well,
am.
thank you, sir. Thanks for being on with us today. This was a great
Thank
show.
you.
thank you. And
Thank
here's the
you.
website. There you go. Oh, you don't need that little bracket at the end, but I did a cut and paste real quick. But yes, he has a lot of good stuff on his website. Check it out. So we have things from Mr. Joseph Liff. Thanks for the session today, Steve. So we did have a couple guests. So okay, well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week here. And everybody have a happy Valentine's Day. Since I didn't wear my Valentine's Day hat, but still, okay.
Valentine's Day, Super Bowl, you name it. It's going to be a fun weekend. So
Fun weekend, yeah.
thanks for starting it out for us, sir, and you have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.